that horrible email.
Oh, yeah.
UMass as human beings, and that we should do the world a favor and stop having children, and that we're animals, and that people interact with us out of pity. I was made aware of this email on September 18th. And the 5 days following that day, where we finally got an email on September 23rd addressing the situation, I thought UMass wasn't going to address it, that nothing was going to happen. And I understand that an investigation is happening to trace back where that email came from, but it's been a couple of days now, and I think I speak for the Black population of UMass of where are we with that? And what is happening if this is a group on campus that looks at us as lesser human beings and that looks down upon us because these people sound dangerous, and it took this situation going viral for something to be said about it. And I just want to know exactly where are you guys with this process of finding out who sent this email to us.
First of all, that's the most horrific email I've ever encountered, and I'm embarrassed to, if in fact it came from somebody associated with this university, I am deeply embarrassed, and I can't wait to get to the bottom of who this is. This is so antithetical to everything that we ever even tried to strive for, let alone I know we haven't achieved. But it's absolutely horrific, and it's just unacceptable. The first question, it was initially what we tried to do is to see if our own information technology can trace it down, track it down, and see if it's coming from somebody that we can identify. When that didn't happen, this is very sophisticated attack. These days, there's a lot of sophisticated attacks that go on. So then we decided that we should get a forensic external, leading experts to help us with that. And that firm has now been retained, a contract signed with them. And then, they're going to look at all the records and metadata and everything else and try to see what they can come up with. And that's, an urgent docket, and they're actually currently beginning to work on that.
So are you guys any closer to when you guys sent that last email of figuring out who, where they were, I don't know anything about technology.
No, again, we're not any closer to knowing where that came from. I do apologize for all the Black community and all of us as a community members who go through that kind of hard even thought process, somebody even thinking that it's so offensive. I couldn't say it's the most common. I do need to apologize.
Thank you.
What repercussions will those people face if they're found?
Again, you're asking me to completely speak in hypotheticals, but if an individual student were found to have sent that, I have no doubt that our code would call for that person's expulsion in the first place. And if there are any criminal or civil rights violations, then we would refer it to the district attorney of the Western District of Massachusetts.
Has the FBI been contacted?
This happened with hang all no niggers, and you guys need to hear that word because that's what the fuck they called us, and nothing was done about that. So I'm begging you, please, there are 3 people of color on this panel, please do something. Because so many of us do not feel comfortable here. There's 2 black women on this panel. I'm praying that you guys actually do something, and you're not just saying this just to give us some type of answer, but I hope you actually do something about it, because I've heard so many people who are afraid to leave their dorms and go to class because they're afraid that the person that they're sitting next to might have the same views as the person in this email. So please do something.
Have you tried to call the FBI?
The FBI has been informed, they have not taken action on this. They're waiting for our process to end. So this is not something where the FBI automatically steps in.
Excuse me. Can you hear me? Awesome. I'm going to let you go about the previous conversation, but just before we can get back to that, I want to step in and say, I am a black man who grew up in a predominantly white town, going to predominantly white schools, and I'm now here at a predominantly white institution. I know that you are embarrassed that somebody affiliated with UMass committed this act, that somebody affiliated with UMass was doing everything back in Melville back in 2018, I think. Please do not make the mistake of thinking that this is an abnormality. This happens everywhere.
Yeah, yeah.
Newspaper to write a letter for the newspaper, dictating and outlining my experience as a person of color going to school in the town that I went to. And the letter that I wrote was scathing, and it was raw, and it was completely honest about all of the BS that me, my brother, who's 5 years younger than me and was experiencing racist and horrible acts when he was in kindergarten. That happened all throughout the school district. I was approached about that. I wrote about that, and they said, no, we don't want to publish this. So please listen when people are telling you that this is something that happens time and time again, and please allow for our voices to be heard. But as the gentleman in the audience was saying, don't wait until we say something about it. We want proactivity, and we want to feel like,
Yeah!
before we have to get up in order to say something about it. And that's all I have to say about that.
Don't just think about helping other students, and don't actually give them the power to actually make actual change. Let me remind each and every one of you that I looked at the demands was sent to y'all last year. Y'all didn't do jack.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt anyone. I'm trying to make this as quick as possible, but I think we also have to consider the fact that these 2 things are so interlinked, sexual assault and also racism. And being a black woman on this campus and going to these frat parties and being fetishized by these white men, and that. So I think you just have to take that into consideration when you're thinking about all of this, and the fact that black women don't want to go through the police. Like, I don't want to be investigated. We don't trust the police. We don't. So the third party needs to not have the police involved in it at all whatsoever.
Especially after you did with Chase Vassell. Let's not forget about Chase Vassell.
All right. I will make my question. I'll first say that I think I speak for everyone in that we would like to see more transparency into any investigations or actions you might be taking. And just to confirm some things you said earlier, you said that you would be bringing in the investigative firm within 4 weeks and that there would be a report by the end of the semester. Is that correct?
A progress report, because the timetable is something that they would have to set in order to really dig deep into what things there. So I don't have a preconceived notion. As quickly as possible, but I think we need to give that leeway to whoever is doing the investigation.
Okay, and you also stated that once everything was done, you would be published on the Title IX section of the UMass website. Is that correct?
As well as progress reports.
Okay. willing to commit to sending a campus-wide email for every progress report and the final results as they come in?
The information is public, however it's publicized wouldn't matter. It means suddenly.
If you send out a campus-wide email, then it will be more visible that you are actually taking actions instead of trying to hide whatever report by yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I see you're not a tech tester, yes?
I said yes, absolutely.
All right.
Okay.
That's all I have to say.
Well, it's caught on camera, so.
I have a couple of questions. One, I hope is quick. The gentleman down at the end there, I'm sorry, I don't know your name. But you were speaking earlier when the student asked about Title IX, and you mentioned the definition of consent, and that it was an issue where the definition that we adopt for consent has to match with the definition in law, right? And so that to me says that the law and the legal system has, priority and authority over what UMass does, because you said it had to match when it ultimately goes to court. The issue with that is that there's a discrepancy between what you said there and what another administrator said earlier when the student who spoke about her friend with the restraining order was asking why the student who the restraining order was against was still allowed to be on campus and in her classes. And the response to that, if I remember correctly, was that UMass had to do its own investigation, or it had to go through the disciplinary system here, and I'm wondering why an outside judicial court doesn't have enough authority, and that's not enough evidence to show that something really did happen. The level of proof that should be required to get a restraining order from a judge should be more than the level of proof that's required to switch someone out of a class because of something.
Yeah, exactly.
A brief response to why there's that discrepancy. I'm just wondering what the relationship is between the campus disciplinary system and the judicial system.
I think the question that I was responding to was why the student was allowed to be on campus. So the restraining order doesn't necessarily prevent someone from being on campus is what I was trying to convey.
Right, and I understand that, but being in the same class as somebody else,
Ooh,
that's
yeah.
a little close. And
Too close. Too close.
It's much too close. And the fact that the student who filed the report was the one who had to switch out or sit out of the theater production, and not the student whose report was filed against, that doesn't make sense.
Also, when we file complaints, it's the complainant that's moved. Like, it's the person that is allegedly the victim that gets moved to a different dorm, not the alleged perpetrator.
Or the aggressor.
So that's just something I wanted to bring up really quickly. And then the second point that I have to make is I posted on my social media about the protests that were going on here. And a family friend of mine saw this post and she started a conversation with me. And she was outraged that we were having to deal with this. But behind that outrage there was despair because she graduated from UMass Amherst 20 years ago and was saying that the same things that we're asking for now and fighting for now were still happening back when she went to school here.
Exactly.
But the fact remains that this is a problem which is not a new or recent problem. And the response to every complaint spoken at one of these two microphones today seems to be more or less along the lines of, we have a system and we need you to work with our system and trust this system. But as we can see, that system isn't working. So at what point do we need to stop working with the system, and at what point does the system need to start working for students? And not just platitudes. Just as other institutions have 1-year plans, 5-year plans, 10-year plans for financial budgets and things like that to give to their shareholders, and we are the shareholders. Everyone who goes to school here and pays upwards of $30,000 or more a year to go to school here deserves to know what is being done to preserve their safety and dignity on campus. And